Hello, hello. We are back. Welcome, everybody. How's everyone doing today? New week, new me. I have tea as per usual. I'm feeling a little out of sorts. I don't have my grandpa mug. It's a different mug. My grandpa mug is currently in the dishwasher, so not really accessible, sadly. Hey, Campbell. I'm doing fine. As I say, a little out of sorts because no grandpa mug. I'm feeling lost without it. I miss it so. But it shall be back. It's okay. The mug I have instead is one that's part of a pair that Amazon Kane and I have is like are matching his and her mugs, so it's cute still. It's fine. I did decide to try out one of the things that we had on. I say we that I had on the like tea ideas for the future, and I made myself some of that Earl Grey I have, and I put some lemon. See how that turns out. Luckily, there's a lemon tree in the backyard, so you can get a fresh lemon and all that stuff. Put a wedge in there. I was surprised the amount to which the color changed. So we'll see how much the flavor changes as well. So we'll give it a go. I still put sugar because I don't. Bitter plus sour does not sound like a flavor combination that I would like. So I put sugar. I always put sugar anyway. Much to the dismay of Orwell. So we'll try that out. I also, now that I think about it, also had some steak for lunch, so I'm feeling mighty like Winston Churchill. All I need is a cigar, and I'll feel the overwhelming urge to do a colonialism. But we are ready to go, and what are we ready to go with today? Well, a couple of things. One of them is going to be rather brief, I imagine, and the other one far too long. So we'll start with the brief one. Uh, Trump's in some hot water again. Now I know I mentioned prior that I didn't anticipate talking about the Trump case for kind of a bit because, as I understood it, the trial was set to begin in August, so it's not like there was going to be any new developments. But lo, I was wrong. Apparently, Trump is facing new charges for, well, we'll see. But they are in relation to the trial at hand. So Trump faces major new charges in documents case. The Office of the Special Counsel accused the former president of seeking to delete security camera footage at Mar-a-Lago. The manager of the property, Oliveira, Carlos de Oliveira, was also named as a new defendant. So yeah, it would appear that there were efforts made to delete video camera footage from Mar-a-Lago, and one must ask the question, why? Let's proceed. Federal prosecutors on Thursday added major accusations to an indictment charging former President Donald J. Trump with mishandling classified documents after he left office, presenting evidence that he told the property manager of Mar-a-Lago, his private club and residence in Florida, that he wanted security camera footage there to be deleted. This is a clunky sentence. Oh my. Okay. These are the added accusations. The new accusations were revealed in a superseding indictment that named the property manager, Carlos de Oliveira, as a new defendant in the case. He is scheduled to be arraigned in Miami on Monday. So, okay, well, never mind if you're just going to be like that. The original indictment filed last month in the Southern District of Florida accused Mr. Trump of violating the Espionage Act by illegally holding onto 31 classified documents containing national defense information after he left office. If you recall, as we went over the indictment, there was a lot more in those boxes, but as I understand it, these are the totality of the documents that were classified, or at the very least, the ones he's being charged with holding on to. I don't imagine that they would leave out charges for any classified documents. uh you might say like, oh, maybe for national security they wouldn't include some, like if you had 30 more, they might not include it just to protect the information that's in there. However, these documents already have national secret information, and so it's not really different. So I imagine that this is the totality of the classified documents, but he was clearly holding on to a lot more, even if only 31 of those documents were classified. And remember, a document isn't a single page, right? This could be like, here's, a 50-page binder that's one document or whatever. It also charged Mr. Trump and Walt Nauta, right? I think that's what we decided on going with. Walt Nauta, one of his personal aides, with a conspiracy to obstruct the government's repeated attempts to reclaim the classified material. The revised indictment added 3 serious charges against Mr. Trump, attempting to, quote, alter, destroy, mutilate, or conceal evidence. Okay, it's just a link to the inducing someone else to do so, and a new count under the Espionage Act related to a classified national security document that he showed to visitors at his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey. The updated indictment was released on the same day that Mr. Trump's lawyers met in Washington with prosecutors in the office of the special counsel Jack Smith to discuss a so-called target letter that Mr. Trump received this month suggesting that he might soon face an indictment in a case related to his efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 election. It's, yeah, just as a reminder, that still hasn't been adjudicated. I think I saw something about him, about Trump saying something effective like, "Oh, come on, that was 2 years ago. What are you even talking about?" Like that, like that's how laws work. It served as a powerful reminder that the document's investigation is ongoing and could continue to yield additional evidence, new counts, and even new defendants. Prosecutors under Mr. Smith have been investigating Mr. Oliveira for months, concerned, among other things, by his communications with an information technology expert at Mar-a-Lago, Yuskil Taveras? Yusil Taveras? I'm not really sure. Who oversaw the surveillance camera footage at the property. The footage That footage was central to Mr. Smith's investigation into whether Mr. Nauta, at Mr. Trump's request, had moved boxes in and out of a storage room at Mar-a-Lago to avoid complying with a federal subpoena for all classified documents in the former president's possession. Many of those movements were caught on the surveillance camera footage. The revised indictment said that in late June of last year, shortly after the government demanded the surveillance footage as part of its inquiry, Mr. Trump called Mr. de Oliveira and they spoke for 24 minutes. 2 days later, the indictment said Mr. Nauta and Mr. de Oliveira went to the security guard booth where the surveillance video is displayed on monitors, walked with a flashlight through the tunnel where the storage room was located, and observed and pointed out surveillance cameras. A few days after that, Mr. de Oliveira went to see Mr. Taveras, who is identified in the indictment as Trump Employee 4, and took him to a small room known as an audio closet. There, the indictment said, the two men had a conversation that was meant to remain between the two of them. It was then that Mr. de Oliveira told Mr. Taveras that the boss wanted the server deleted, so the boss would be Trump, obviously. And deleting the whole server is kind of wild. I mean, if Trump said he wanted the server deleted, it's probably because he doesn't understand how this stuff works. You don't have to delete a server. That's not what servers are or how they work. But he wanted the contents deleted is the point. I'm just pointing out that he also doesn't know how these things work. He just wants things. The indictment said, referring to the computer server holding the security footage, Mr. Taveras objected and said he did not know how to delete the server and did not think he had the right to do so, the indictment said. At that point, the indictment said okay, we get it. It's all according to the indictment. It said Mr. de Oliveira insisted again that the boss wanted the server deleted, asking, "What are we going to do?" 2 months later, after the FBI descended on Mar-a-Lago with a search warrant and hauled away about 100 classified documents. Yeah, that's what I mean. There were 100 classified documents? Okay, that's kind of weird. But only 30 were being charged? Yeah, I'm curious why. Maybe it was, not a big deal for him to have the other ones. I don't know. The other 69? Nice. People in Mr. Trump's orbit appear to be concerned about Mr. de Oliveira's loyalties. Someone just wants to make sure Carlos is good, the indictment quoted Mr. Nauta saying to another Trump employee. This sounds like like an organized crime syndicate of hey, we just want to make sure that we can trust this guy, otherwise we might get to break his knees and all I'm saying. In response, the indictment said that the employee told Mr. Nauta that Mr. de Oliveira was loyal and would not do anything to affect his relationship with Mr. Trump. After the conversation, Mr. Trump, who during his 2016 presidential campaign often assailed his opponent Hillary Clinton for deleting material from her email server, yeah, of course, it was always nonsense, called Mr. de Oliveira and said that he would get him a lawyer. The revised indictment also charges Mr. de Oliveira with lying to federal investigators. It recounts an exchange in which he repeatedly denied seeing or knowing anything about boxes of documents at Mar-a-Lago, even though, the indictment said, he had personally observed and helped move them when they arrived. Mr. de Oliveira's lawyer, John Irving, declined to comment. A statement attributed only to the Trump campaign called the new accusations a desperate and flailing attempt by the Justice Department to undercut Mr. Trump, the current frontrunner for the Republican nomination, to take on President Biden next year. So notice, like, it's not that I didn't do it. It's just like you're just trying to. It's all conspiracy, right? It's all nonsense. Anytime you hear something like this that's so wildly off topic and so like absurd at its face, you can just dismiss it, right? This kind of harkens back to a very common atheist retort, which is that which can be. It's not unique to them so much as frequently used by atheists, which is that which can be asserted without evidence can be rejected without evidence. Mr. Trump and Mr. Nauta have both pleaded not guilty to the charges in the original indictment. Their case has been scheduled to go to trial in May. In May? I was under the impression it was August, but I guess it makes sense that that they would try to delay as much as possible. I mean, Trump has to be hoping that the election will get him out of it, right? Because if he wins the presidential election, you know, he'll probably try to pardon himself, or at the very least, he'll be like above the law, functionally speaking. What is he going to be, president from prison? I don't think he's going to see a day in jail either. But you know, you get the point that he'll use the office to try to exonerate himself. The new charges lay out in detail efforts by Mr. Nauta to speak with Mr. de Oliveira about the security camera footage, and to determine how long the footage was stored after the government sought to obtain it under a subpoena. So yeah, this article is kind of roundabout as how it gets to the information, but as I understand, there was a subpoena issued. For those of you who aren't aware, a subpoena is a request for, I think it's a demand from, you know what, let's look it up. Let's not speculate before I say something really stupid. How do you spell it? It's spelled super weird. All right. A writ ordering a person to attend a court, or I know it's also for documents. A subpoena is an order ordering for a person or for evidence to be presented in court. So as I understand it, the subpoena was issued by the government for the security camera footage. Obviously, if the charge is that these documents were moved in these boxes in and out, and there's security camera footage of it, and then that would be pretty good evidence for it. So Trump, for some reason, orders that the entire server holding all of the security camera footage be deleted. Why? Don't really ask yourself, like, why would that be? Unless there was incriminating evidence he didn't want shown in there. Like maybe if there's some something personal, one, it's unlikely to be caught on security cameras, and two, maybe you can make requests with the government to be like, okay, well, how about not this because it's personal or whatever. In any case, it's not all going to be presented in court, only the things that are relevant. Obviously, he's just trying to cover his tracks, and as it's probably obvious to you, destroying evidence is a crime, and that's what this indictment is about. The indictment contains an additional charge related to a classified document, a battle plan related to attacking Iran. This is the kind of thing where I'm like, I'm surprised we're getting to know about this, because this feels like exactly the kind of thing that the government would not want the general populace knowing about, let alone having that be accessible to, Iran. That Mr. Trump showed during a meeting at his Bedminster Golf Club to two people helping his former White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, write a book. Yeah, just to people, just random people, not like government people, just like, oh, you're helping write a book? Here's a battle plan related to attacking Iran. The updated indictment provides specific dates during which Mr. Trump was in possession of the document from January 20th, 2021, the day he left office, through January 17th, 2022, the date Mr. Trump turned over 15 boxes of presidential material to the National Archives. The specificity of the dates indicates that prosecutors have the document in question and that the indictment describes it as, quote, presenting concerning military activity in a foreign country, end quote, adding it was marked as top secret. The meeting, if you remember, there was the classification markings that the indictment goes over. Is it will either be uh, uh, I believe it's confidential, secret, and top secret. So top secret being the most secret. It's the top secret. There aren't any more secrets on top of it. It is the toppest secret. The meeting at which Mr. I know I'm an idiot. It's okay. You can tell me. It's fine. I know. The meeting at which Mr. Trump showed off the document was captured in an audio recording, and Mr. Trump can be heard rustling paper and describing the document as secret and sensitive. Still, he has tried to suggest that he never had a document in his possession. It was simply blustering. Yeah, I'm sure. There was no document, Mr. Trump claimed to the Fox News host Brett Baer in a recent interview. I just want to note for like the obviousness of this lie of like why would he be talking to someone and saying like, oh, look at this cool document that has this stuff, and it but didn't actually have it. That would only make sense in a circumstance where he's his audio is being recorded, but nobody's actually looking at him. But he's in a room with other people to whom he's showing the document, right? Obviously, that makes no sense to be like, oh yeah, look at this document, and then like holds up his empty hand. What? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. All right, let's try some of this lemony tea. Okay. Mm, too soon to tell. I think I put too much lemon. He said put a wedge, so I'm like, all right, I'll put like a sizable wedge of lemon, but I think I put too much. That's on me. Uh, but I can understand the appeal. I suppose is what I'm saying. All right, that was a massive amount of papers and everything else talking about Iran and other things. And God, it's so impossible to read quotes of Trump speaking because it's just nonsense. The sentence just ends. That was a massive amount of papers and everything else talking about Iran and other things. And it may have been held up or may not, but that was not a document. I didn't have a document per se. There was nothing to declassify. So remember before his so he's trying to like build in his multiple defenses. Remember, the first defense was I was allowed to have them. Then it was uh I I declassified them. Like in my brain, I decided they were declassified. Then it was I was allowed to declassify them, but didn't, which was part of the indictment, by the way. Then it was uh and I'm skipping the like the allegations he made because in between at some point he was like, oh, but Biden did it too. I was like, okay, that has nothing to do with anything. Then it was I have the right to hold on to these. I forget exactly what his defense was last time because it wasn't a defense, but we read over it if you remember. And now it wasn't actually there. It wasn't actually. I didn't actually have it, even though it's on tape, and I'm covering my tracks constantly, or attempting to cover my tracks constantly. It's one of those like it's kind of funny to the ineptitude. If you were in Trump's position and you had done this, would you order someone else to delete the tapes, or would you just go do it yourself, or just have Now to do it? Why would you involve other people who might not follow through, right? Like, why would you involve additional opportunities for someone to be like, oh yeah, I don't think I'm allowed to do that. Let me tell the authorities about it because that sounds like you're asking me to do crimes. But he's also not a very smart person, so. The original indictment filed by Mr. Smith and his team in June came about 2 months after local prosecutors in New York filed more than 30 felony charges against Mr. Trump in a case connected to a hush money payment made to a porn star in advance of the 2016 election. Man, they're just doing all the greatest hits of recent Trump indictments. This guy is in and out of court constantly. There's a really interesting episode of Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. I mean, it's ages ago now. This is like I think before the 2016 election, where he talks about the Trump lawsuits in his past, and it's like Trump has had more lawsuits than the totality of courtroom drama television episodes there are in existence. Like, yeah, this guy is constantly doing illegal shit, or like taking people to court, or being sued by people for not paying them, or whatever. Like he's constantly getting involved in, well, seemingly illegal activity. Mr. Trump remains under investigation by Mr. Smith's office over his wide-ranging efforts to retain power after his election loss in 2020, and how those efforts led to the January 6, 2021 assault on the Capitol by a pro-Trump mob. He is also being scrutinized for possible election interference by the District Attorney's Office in Fulton County, Georgia. So yeah, seems he just cannot stop doing crimes, and he should probably stop doing crimes. That's my legal advice to him: is don't do crimes anymore. That would be good if you stopped criming. But there's not much else to say about it. The point is, he's now demonstrating more than prior, which was a lot, his apparent feelings of guilt. He's trying to, like, by telling his staff to delete security camera footage so that it can't be subpoenaed, because obviously it shows that he did what he's accused of doing. It's just one of those, like, these are the actions of a very, very guilty person. And, well, we'll see what comes of it, but I guess May is when the trial is set to begin. I do a bit worry that it will be delayed long enough for the 2024 election, and while I don't think he'll win, I am worried that he would, and then in that case, can leverage the power of the president to exonerate himself from charges. I mean, we might even have it come up of, like, if he pardons himself, we might have to ask that question in a court of law. Is that allowed? And it's very unclear, as I understand it. I'm not a lawyer, but the legal professionals that I've heard talk about it say it's exceptionally unclear as to whether a president can pardon himself. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, it just keeps getting worse for Trump, which is, by the way, great, because as it turns out, he's still winning in the polls. 5:30. Weirdly, the worse things get for Trump, the further ahead he gets. DeSantis, his main competitor, is dipping in the polls. He's just way too obsessed with the woke stuff. It's clear. Like, Republican voters have said they are disinterested in the woke stuff. He talks about it too much, and he will not stop. He just keeps going on and on and on about it. And so he's falling in the polls. Trump is, I mean, he has a wide lead in for the primary race. This is for the primary, not for the general. And of course, estimates, things don't always work out this way. Polling tends to be rather accurate, but of course, projections are not the same thing as polling. So don't take this as, like, if the vote happens tomorrow, this is exactly what will break down. This is an estimate of voter sentiment. And it seems that for Republican primary voters, Trump is significantly in the lead. Not merely a plurality, but a majority of well, I guess this isn't, no, this also, wait, is this, actually, now that I think about it, is this approval rating? No, this is, okay, this is actually for the polls, for the primary. So he's exceptionally ahead, and that's kind of a good thing, because if he goes to jail, like, I don't know, like, if he gets convicted, that does not look good for him. There are some number of people who actually believe what Republicans lie about believing, which is that they care about law and order and the rule of law and yada yada, etc. Now, it's not foolproof. I mean, literally, Hitler was imprisoned before he was elected. I'm not calling Trump Hitler, but what I am saying is that it's not impossible that he could win despite being convicted, if he is. I'm just saying that it becomes a lot less likely, and he's the front runner. We back at it again. Yeah, what's up, Jax? We just went over the new Trump indictment, in case you missed it. But now we're going to talk about aliens, because that's about all I have to say about this. And in Congress, there was a hearing about UFOs and aliens, yada yada, etc. Now, I hadn't planned initially to talk about this or to watch it because it seemed massively uninteresting to me. As much as people were like, "Oh my God, aliens," there were a couple of ideas floating around in my head that made this seem a lot less significant than it was being portrayed. One of those things is UFOs does not mean spaceship. They're in colloquial language, like the way people talk to each other. It's like, oh yeah, UFO means alien spaceship or whatever. No, it just means we don't know what it is and it's flying, or it appears to be flying. And UFO sightings have been happening for ages and ages, and they could be any number of things. Maybe like I don't want to speculate about exactly what those things could be because I don't know how good our technology is to be able to, like, maybe a meteorite could it may seem like a UFO, maybe not, I don't know, but like it is not necessarily evidence of alien spacecraft, right? A UFO could be any number of things. It just means it's unidentified. It could be something as simple as another military has some flight technology that we're unaware of, and so we don't recognize the craft, right? That it could be as simple as that. And I'm sure that happens in other countries with the United States every now and again when we have new technology, new aircraft technology. So UFOs don't necessarily mean anything. As far as aliens, well, as I understand it, we've known for quite a long time that there are signs of life on other planets. As I understand it, we have, like, scientists have found signs of life on Mars, but bacterial life. Obviously, when we think aliens, we think, little green man or whatever. We think intelligent life, not just, there's a bacteria on another planet. And of course, it's like almost statistically assured that there is life on other planets that could develop to be intelligent. Maybe not human intelligence, maybe more, maybe less, right? Like if they got to the point of, say, like amphibians, and then there was a mass extinction event, that is very possible, and almost, as I understand it, almost statistically guaranteed, just due to the size of the universe. But that doesn't necessarily mean we'll have contact. However, people keep talking about this in a way like we were talking about, like, having actual aliens, and that seems very unlikely given that people haven't given this much attention. So we'll watch this for a little bit and we'll see how it goes. It's very long, so we're probably not going to pause very much, despite the fact that I like to talk. But there's not that much to go over, so we'll skip around a bit, try to find where things get where they get into the meat of it, because there's probably going to be a lot of procedure of, like, the chair recognizes this person from this place without objection or whatever else, so let's just get into it.
The subcommittee hearing on unidentified today, the border and foreign affairs.
Yeah, as I said, like, there's going to be just a lot of talking about
testimonies. We will seek clarity as to objective here, define our republic, which is a commitment to transparency. We can improve governance. Representative Burchett from Tennessee.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. I want to thank everybody for making this happen today, and I want to remind you.
So let's see what comes out of this. There's also another hearing going on right now. I wanted to start with I was thinking about maybe watching that one instead, but my thought was, well, what if there's something relevant here? We'll see. My guess is this is going to be not at all what how people are portraying it, and if it is, we're just not going to come back to it. That's fine.
My buddy Eric Burleson, and it's not in my notes here, but
all right, let's try this lemon infused tea. See if it's any different.
Trying to get some answers. He's got an incredible legal mind. Also, I know I saw it in the crowd there, George Knapp, my buddy Jeremy Corbell.
I do like it, actually. I think I put too much lemon, but it is good.
Not witnesses, but
all right,
provided some statements.
You got one on me, Orwell.
And I seek unanimous consent to enter those statements into
all right,
the record,
can
Mr.
we
Chairman.
get to anything? I think they're going to introduce the people. When it came to, like, the Jan 6 indictments, and I was watching them on my own, I listened to all of it. But
cutting in on my time.
Yeah, for real.
These folks, they've got nothing to gain from this. FAA that it would.
Okay.
Explanations and footage and mountains of overclassified documents that continue to be hidden in even the minds of our.
About this.
surrounding UAPs has captivated the attention of the American people for
Okay,
decades.
this is more preamble. Is
ingrained
this
in the
is just
minds of our
everyone on the panel
conversations with
going
many
to
pilots.
go
Institutions, as we all
talk
know,
about
is
why
at
it
an
matters to
all-time
them?
low. Partisanship, UAPs, partisan work by members of the House and
I just want to
Senate
get to the
dating
actual
many years back, which
testimony,
is sought to increase
or like the
awareness.
actual
To have
question.
demonstrated unusual flight characteristics. One in leader Congress group
Must introduce our witnesses.
Okay, now we're introducing the witnesses. Yeah, this is why we're skipping ahead, because like, oh my god, a half hour of just
If
like.
everyone could see the sensor and video data,
Oh, okay, hold on.
18 years.
They're actually going to
Mr.
have
Faber has his
their.
own
They're actually going to
UAP
have an opening
experience.
statement. Finally, we get to
Let's
something.
talk a bit. I look forward to hearing from all three of you today. Pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, the witnesses will please stand and raise their right hands.
All right, swearing in, yada yada.
The record
Okay.
appreciate statement by men, 4 minutes.
members of the House. Thank you.
All right.
Chairman Grothman, Ranking Member Garcia, distinguished members of the House Oversight Subcommittee on National Security, Representatives Burchett and Luna. My name is Ryan Fobbs Graves, and I am a former F-18 pilot with a decade of service in the U.S. Navy, including 2 deployments in Operation Enduring Freedom.
That's
and
also why I
Operation
skipped their
Inherent
introductions,
Resolve.
because I figured
I
they
have
would
experienced
introduce
advanced
themselves.
UAP firsthand, and I'm here to voice the concerns of more than 30 commercial aircrew and military veterans who have confided their similar encounters with me. Today, I would like to highlight 3 critical issues that demand our action. As we convene here, UAP are in our airspace, but they are grossly underreported. These sightings are not rare or isolated, they are routine. Military aircrew and commercial pilots, trained observers whose lives depend on accurate identification, are frequently witnessing these phenomena. The stigma attached
definitely
to
too much
UAP
lemon.
is real and powerful and challenges national security. It silences commercial pilots who fear professional repercussions, discourages witnesses. It is only
Oh,
compounded
no.
by
We got
recent
this
government
conspiracism
claims
out the
questioning
front.
credibility of eyewitness testimony.
Can we just get to what
Parts
that
of our
evidence
government are aware
is?
of more about UAP than they let on, but excessive classification practices keep crucial information hidden. Since 2021, all UAP videos are classified as secret or above. This level of secrecy not only impedes our understanding, but fuels speculation and mistrust. In 2014, I was an F-18
So far, all he's
Foxtrot
really said
pilot
is
in the
there's
Navy
stuff we
Fighter
don't know, and they're not
Aircraft
telling
Corps,
us,
the
and
Red
because they're
Raiders.
not telling us, we're just
And I was
speculating. But that doesn't
stationed
mean
at NAS
anything,
Oceana
right?
in Virginia Beach.
It sounds like this guy doesn't
After
know
upgrades were made to our jet's
anything
radar systems, we
of-
began detecting
of
unknown objects
interest.
operating in our airspace.
like detecting objects
At
is one
first,
thing,
we
right?
assumed they were radar errors. But soon, we began to correlate the radar tracks with multiple onboard sensors, including infrared systems, eventually through visual ID.
That's something I want to remind
During a
everyone is
training
like,
mission-
as additional unlikelihood of actual alien encounters, it's not just like, okay, there need to be aliens. They also need to be intelligent. They also need to have developed space flight. They also need to be close enough where they can actually travel to Earth. Something to note is if there are aliens, 10 billion light years away on a planet 10 billion light years away from us, but they couldn't really get here in the age of the universe. As I understand it, the approximate age of the universe is 13 billion years, though I've heard it might be double that. But still, if it's like 100 billion light years away, can't possibly travel that distance in the time it takes, right? And on top of that, they need to show up here but hide that they're showing up. Like they're not gonna show up in any way that anyone who's at an observatory will notice. People whose job it is to look at the sky. They're not gonna show up in a way where like you can just literally see it just in the sky with your eyeballs. Instead, they like hang out on the periphery of our detection equipment to do what exactly? That's the thing. It's just like there's so many things of like why would it happen in this way? There must be more reasonable explanations. So when someone just says, "Oh, there's stuff we can't identify," that doesn't matter that much to me. What would matter to me is a government official being like, "Oh yeah, like here we have this spacecraft and it's identifiably a spacecraft and it's identifiably non-human," or like here we have like this alien that has been hanging out on Earth since whenever. His name is Fred or whatever.
In warning area Whiskey 72, 10 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach, 2 F-18 Super Hornets were split by a UAP. The object, described as a dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere, came within 50 feet of the lead aircraft and was estimated to be 5 to 15 feet in diameter. The mission commander terminated the flight immediately and returned to base. Our squadron submitted a safety report, but there was no official acknowledgement of the incident.
Like,
and no
that's
further
spooky.
mechanism
Like, that
to
information
report
is
the
definitely
sighting.
spooky, but it doesn't necessarily,
Soon, these
like,
encounters became so
any
frequent that
number of
aircrew would
things
discuss
are
the threat
more
of the UAP
likely
as part
than
of their
alien
regular pre-flight
spacecraft.
briefs. Recognizing the need for action and answers, I founded Americans for Safe Aerospace. The organization has since become a haven for UAP witnesses who were previously unspoken due to the absence
Oh,
of a safe
interesting. He
intake
has a
process.
foundation he founded.
More than 30 witnesses have come forward, and almost 5,000 Americans have joined us
Suddenly
in the
there's a
fight for
financial interest in this.
transparency
Yeah,
at
okay.
safeaerospace.org.
I'm not saying he's a
Majority
grifter or
of
whatever. I'm
witnesses
just
are
saying, like,
commercial pilots at majority
if
major
that it
airlines.
would be a more
Often,
likely
they are veterans
explanation
with
than
decades of flying
aliens.
experience. Pilots are reporting UAP at altitudes that appear above them at 40,000 feet, potentially in low Earth orbit or in the gray zone below the Kármán line, making inexplainable maneuvers like right-hand turns and retrograde orbits or J-hooks. Sometimes these reports are reoccurring, with numerous recent sightings north of Hawaii and in the North Atlantic. Other veterans are also coming forward to us regarding UAP encounters in our airspace and oceans. The most compelling involve observations of UAP by multiple witnesses and sensor systems.
I should stop drinking
believe
that.
these
It's just-
accounts are only scratching
Oh,
the
the lemon
surface,
is
and more
overpowering.
will share their experiences once
I don't
it
wanna
is
waste
safe
it,
to
though.
do so. In closing, I recognize the skepticism surrounding this topic.
Okay.
If everyone
We're
could
gonna get
see
to
the
this
sensor
episode.
and video data I witnessed, our national conversation would change. I urge us to put aside stigma and address the security and safety issue this topic represents. If UAP
Yeah,
are
but see,
foreign
this is the thing.
drones,
Like, it would be
is
one
urgent
thing if this
national
guy was here
security problem.
presenting that
If it is
information.
something
Like,
else,
why
it is an
not?
issue for science.
Is there, like, there might be reasons
In
why
either
he
case,
can't, but
unidentified objects are
I'd like
concerns
to know
for
what that
flight
is.
safety.
It's
American
it's
people
another
deserve
thing
to know what's
entirely
happening in
for
the
someone to
skies.
present
It is long overdue.
evidence that we need to know. Like, this seems to be a petition to get evidence in the same way the whole, like, Area 51 protest that didn't happen, or like raid, I guess,
Mr.
that
Chairman,
didn't happen.
ranking members in Congress.
It was like, you know.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. This is an important issue, and I'm grateful for your time. My name is David Charles Grush. I was an intelligence officer for 14 years, both in the U.S. Air Force, both active duty, Air National Guard, and Reserve, at the rank of major, and most recently from 2021 to 2025, or excuse me, 2023. At
He's
the
in the
National
future.
Geospatial Intelligence Agency.
He is the
NGA,
alien.
at the GS-15 civilian level, which is the military equivalent of a full bird colonel. I was my agency's co-lead in unidentified anomalous phenomena and transmedium object analysis, as well as reporting to the UAP Task Force, UAPTF, and eventually, once it was established, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, ARROW. I became a whistleblower through a PPD 19.
Okay, so he says he's a whistleblower, but, like, what actual evidence does he have? Is it just like we saw weird shit, or is it like we have definitive evidence? And let me tell you about it.
Multiple esteemed and credentialed current and former military and intelligence community individuals that the U.S. government is operating with secrecy above congressional oversight with regards to UAPs. My testimony is based on information I've been given by individuals with a long-standing
Testimony
track
from
record of
individuals,
legitimacy
not
and service to this country.
not actual evidence.
Many of whom also have shared compelling evidence in the form of photography, official documentation, and classified oral testimony to myself and my various colleagues. I have taken every step I can.
Oh, and by the way, like, something else to note, because I was saying, like, oh, it could be like another military has an aircraft. It could also be just the U.S. military has classified aircraft that they're not telling other people. Right? Some of the people that have been mentioned are commercial pilots. They're not gonna. The U.S. government isn't gonna tell every 747 pilot, like, oh, hey, by the way, like, we got these weird aircraft that we're testing out, and it's super classified, and it might be for future military endeavors. Don't tell nobody. I'm not gonna tell everyone about that. So, like, if you see something weird happening, well, that could be what's going on, you know. This sounds more like we saw some weird shit, and not I have actual evidence. Let's make it public.
To corroborate this evidence over a period of
And I just
4
don't put much
years
stock in
while I
we
was
saw
with the
weird
UAP
shit.
Task Force, and do my due diligence on the individual sharing it. This is because of these steps, I believe strongly in the importance of bringing this information before you. I am driven by a commitment of both to truth and transparency,
Sure.
rooted in our inherent duty to uphold the
Yeah,
United
this
States
sounds like a
Constitution
This sounds like
protect the American
a
people.
request that the government
I'm asking
corroborate the
Congress
weird
to hold our
shit
government to
that's
this
been seen
standard
and not
thoroughly investigate these
we have
claims.
the actual info we
But
want
as
to
I
tell you.
stand here under oath now, I am speaking to the facts as I've been told them.
As he has been
In
told
the
them.
U.S. Air Force, in my National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, reservist capacity,
I'm
I
glad
was a
I'm
member of the UAP
finding
task
out what these
force
hearings are
from
like, because
2019
I just
to
heard people being like
2021.
aliens. It's
I
like, hold
served at the
on,
NRO
Did-
Operations Center
is
on
that
the
actually what came
director's
out?
briefing staff, which included the coordination of the Presidential Daily Brief and supporting variety of contingency operations, which I was the Reserve Intelligence Division Chief backup. In 2019, the UAP Task Force Director asked me to identify all special access programs and controlled access programs, also known as SAPs and CAPs, we needed to satisfy our congressionally mandated mission, and we were direct report at the time to the DepSecDef. At
Oh
the
wow,
time,
that was a
due to
lot
my
of that was a lot of
executive level
jargon.
intelligence support duties, I was
DepSecDef.
cleared to literally all relevant compartments and in a position of extreme trust, both in my military and civilian capacities. I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, to which I was denied access to those additional read-ons when I requested it. I made the decision, based on the data I collected, to
That is a
report this
little bit-
information to my superiors.
I was gonna
and
say that's a
multiple
little bit
inspectors
more
general,
spooky
and
in that,
effect,
like, there's
becoming
a
whistleblower.
organization about
As you know,
finding these
I've
crashes
suffered
and reconstructing them, but that,
retaliation
again
for
could
my
just be
decision,
foreign
but
military
I am
aircraft.
hopeful that my actions will ultimately lead to a positive outcome of increased transparency. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
I skipped past what they meant by UAP. Does
Thank
anyone
you.
know? I'm just gonna look it up, I
Commander
guess.
Fravor?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Congressman.
Unidentified aerial phenomenon. Okay, yeah, and it's like
I want to first thank
could
you for the
be any
invitation
number
to
of
speak
things.
at
It's
the
just a
Committee on the
phenomenon. It
UAP
might not
topic
even
that's
be a
been in the
craft
news
of any
for the
kind.
past 6 years and seems to be
I'm becoming more
continuing to gain
skeptical by the
momentum.
moment.
As you know, my name is David Fravor. I'm a retired commander in the United States Navy. In 2004, I was a commanding officer of Strike Fighter Squadron 41, the world-famous Black Aces. We were attached to Carrier Wing 11, stationed on board the USS Nimitz, and had begun a 2-month workup cycle off the coast of California. On this day, we were scheduled for a 2v2 air-to-air training with the USS Princeton as our control. When we launched off Nimitz, my wingman was joining up. We were told that the training was going to be suspended and we were going to proceed with real-world tasking. As we proceeded to the west, the air controller was counting down the range to an object that we were going to, and we were unaware of what we were going to see when we arrived.
It sounds like another. Here's a spooky
The
story.
controller told us that these objects.
It's kind of telling,
had been
right?
observed
That the
for over
three
2 weeks
people
coming
here
down
are
from
like,
over
we have
80,000
spooky
feet,
stories,
rapidly
not
descending to 20,000 feet, hanging
we're
out for
from some
hours, and
government
then straight
agency
back
that
up
actually
because
knows
don't
what's
realize
up and
we're
like here's the
80,000 feet into
evidence.
space. We arrived at the location at approximately 20,000 feet, and the controller called merge plot, which means that our radar blip was now in the same resolution cell as the contact.
One thing I'm curious
As we
about is
looked
like
around,
why
we noticed
this
that we saw
hearing
some
happened.
whitewater off our right side. It's important to note that the weather on this day was as close to perfect as you could ask for off the coast of San Diego. Clear skies, light winds, calm seas, no whitecaps from waves. So the whitewater stood out in a large blue ocean. All four of us,
Okay,
an
well,
F-18F,
I could have
so we had
guessed that.
pilots and Wizzo in the back seat, looked down a small, saw a white tic-tac object with a longitudinal axis pointing north-south and moving very abruptly over the water like a ping pong ball.
What I want to
There
know
were
is
no
like
rotors,
why
no
this
rotor
why this
wash,
hearing
or any sign
occurred
of
in the
visible
first
control
place.
surfaces like wings.
Like what are they
As we started clockwise towards the object,
what are they
my Wizzo and
here
I decided
to
go down
do?
and
Like
take
this
a
happens
closer
for a
look at the
reason,
other
right?
aircraft staying in high cover to observe both us and the tic-tac.
This does resemble the Jan 6 hearings
proceeded
in
around the circle
form,
about
but
90
with
degrees from
those
the
there was a
start of our
reason
descent,
why that
and
was
the
happening. Is there a
object
reason for
suddenly
like does
shifted
Congress
its
want to know about
longitudinal
UFOs?
axis, aligned it with my
Are they
aircraft,
convinced they're aliens or
and
whatever?
began to climb.
And these are the
Continued
experts they
down
brought
another
in?
270 degrees, nose low, where the tic-tac, or we considered 270 degrees to where, and we went nose low to where the tic-tac would have been. Our altitude at this point was about 15,000 feet, and the tic-tac was about 12,000. As we pulled nose onto the object, within about a half mile of it, it rapidly accelerated in front of us and disappeared. Our wingman, roughly 8,000 feet above us, lost contact also. We immediately turned back to see where the whitewater was at, and it was gone also. So as we started to turn back towards the east, the controller came up and said, "Sir, you're not going to believe this, but that thing is at your cat point, roughly 60 miles away in less than a minute. You can calculate the speed." We returned to Nimitz. We were taking off our gear. We were talking to one of my crews that was getting ready to launch. We mentioned it to them, and they went out and luckily got the video that you see, that 90-second video.
I agree this
What
is
you don't
spooky.
see is the radar tape that was never released.
Sure.
We don't know where it's it's at, of the act of jamming that the object put on an APG-73 radar, and I can get into modes later if you're interested.
Again, like, imagine being the
What's
alien
shocking to
here.
us
Like,
is that
we're
the
gonna come
incident was
down.
never investigated. None of
When
my
we get
crew ever
detected,
questioned.
we're just gonna
Tapes
go
were
on a
not
merry
taken, and after a
chase.
couple
We're gonna
days,
show
it
up
turned into great
elsewhere. Not
stories
just
of
like
friends.
we have the
It wasn't
technology to
until 2009
vanish,
until Jay Stratton
but we're not
contacted
just gonna
me to
go. We're gonna
investigate.
show up elsewhere.
Unbeknownst to all, he was part of the ATIP
I don't
program
know.
in the
It's like,
Pentagon led by
why?
Lee
Like, it's
Elizondo.
nonsense
And there was an
behavior.
unofficial official report that came out that's now on the internet.
I guess you could
Years
argue
later, I was
aliens don't
contacted by the
necessarily
other
have the
pilot,
same
Alex
kind of
Dietrich,
logic, but
and
like if they,
asked if I'd
yeah,
been
I don't know. This
contacted.
is just
I
not,
said no,
yeah.
but I'm willing to talk.
It just feels
I was
like
contacted by
spookiness
Mr.
that
Elizondo,
is better explained
and,
in other ways.
We talked for a short period of time, and he said we'd be in contact. A few weeks after that, I was
Aliens
made
is
aware
like
that
the
Blue had
least
left the
likely
Pentagon in protest
explanation.
and joined forces with Tom DeLonge, Chris Mellon, Steve Justice.
Tom
and others
DeLonge,
from
god
Jay
damn
Stark's
it! I was
Academy,
wondering if
an
he was gonna
organization
get,
that
it was
breastfeeds
gonna
with
be
leading
here. I
industry
guess he's
experts
being
and U.S.
mentioned.
government officials. They worked with Leslie Kean, who is present today, Ralph Blumenthal, and Helene Cooper to publish the articles in the New York Times 2017 New York Times, and it removed the stigma on the topic of UFOs, which is why we're here today. Those articles open the door for the government and public that cannot be closed. It has led to an interest from our elected officials who are not focused on little green men, but figuring out where these craft are, where they from, the technology they possess, how do they operate. It also led to the Whistleblower Protection Act and the NDAA. There are multiple witnesses coming forward to say that have firsthand knowledge, and Mr. Grush just covered that. What concerns me is that there's no oversight from our elected officials on anything associated with our government processing or working on craft. Believe it, not from this world. This issue is not a full public disclosure
Wait,
that could
what?
undermine national security, but it is about ensuring that our system of checks and balances.
Yeah,
works
and now
across
he's
all work
like,
done in
he's
the
saying
government
he's
using
basically
taxpayer
convinced
funds.
that the government
Relative
has
to government
alien craft.
programs,
We're
even
trying to
public knowledge of aid
replicate them,
programs have some level of
and it's
oversight by the
absurd that we don't
appropriate
have
committee members in the House and
oversight
Senate.
on it. But like,
And this work that is said to be occurring from whistleblower
I don't know.
testimonies should not be
We
exempt.
we can't
In
be sure
closing, I
that.
would like
Yeah, I
to say
don't know.
that the
This
Tic
feels
Tac object we made
conspiratorial.
in 2004 was far superior to anything that we had on time, have today, or looking
Like, don't
to
you think,
develop
chat?
in the
Doesn't
next
this
10
feel
years.
like
If we in fact have
kind of a
programs that
nothing
possess
burger?
this technology, it needs to have oversight from those people that the citizens of this great country elected in office to represent what is best for the United States and best for the citizens. I thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I know it's very difficult for all of you, all you've done in the past to try to illuminate this issue. Call on myself first for some questions. I'm going to start with Mr. Graves. Are your
I don't think they
pilots-
buy it too much.
the pilots that you interact with as part of your organization, do you feel adequately trained and
Maybe.
briefed
I'm
on
not
how to
sure.
handle encounters with UAPs?
I'll be honest. I'm not sure, Kim Gal.
No.
I don't know
Right now,
how much
military
the witnesses
to
actually
UAP
believe.
have limited options for reporting UAP.
Um,
But more concerning is
maybe.
that commercial,
I don't think it much
aviation
matters to me. The
sector
point
has
to
not
me is
adapted
that they
to the
don't
lessons that
they don't
the
have any
military has
evidence.
implemented.
They have
The
like
military
spooky
and foreign
stories,
defense
but
has
not.
stated that UAP
Here's a little green
represent
man.
a critical
Oh,
peace and
oh,
safety
oh,
risk.
sorry, I misread you.
We have
You don't
not
think
seen
you buy
that-
it too much?
that
Yeah, I
same,
agree. I don't.
that same language being
It's
used
just
in the
like
commercial
why.
markets. They are not
It's just
acknowledging this risk.
so many things have to be
What steps
assumed
do you
for
have to
aliens
take
to be the most
improve
likely
a pilot's
explanation.
UAP reporting, be it military or commercial?
Right now, we need a system where pilots can report without fear of losing their jobs.
Can
There's
pilots
a
not
fear
report
that the stigma
UAP
associated
without
with this
fear of
topic
losing
is
it?
going to lead to potential
That sounds
repercussions,
weird.
either
Like,
through management or
yeah,
perhaps
they
through
should
their
probably
own
be able to
physical
report
check.
weird things they
So having a
see.
secure
Why
system,
wouldn't they be able to?
reducing the stigma, and making this information available through the public is going to reduce.
I
concerns
guess
that
maybe the
we
reason
have.
is like if these
Please
are
give me a little
American
idea of the
military
degree to
aircraft
which
that
reports in the
are
past
are,
not made public right now.
trying to be
Well,
kept
I
secret.
don't think there has been a proper reporting system to gather those reports and thus not report them. So to answer your question,
'Cause that's
I
the thing,
think there's
like-
a dearth of data due to the
Like the reporting system seems reasonable to me, not because I think there are aliens, but because I think there could be other things going on, and at the very least understanding these aspects of our universe. Like it could just be a quirk of physics that we weren't aware of yet, you know, or it could be it could be like technological issues that can be resolved once you start reporting this bug or whatever. Or it could, as I say, it could be military aircraft from other governments. Well, we'd want to know about this kind of thing. There should probably be a reporting system just for like, hey, I found this weird thing. And actually reminds me a little bit of, I know I quote Lawrence Krauss a lot, but I think he's really interesting. There was a line from him where he was saying like, you know, when you're studying science, you know, you come across a thing that you never, that's really weird, and you're just like, oh, it's so confusing, I don't know. And maybe you don't, you know, figure out what's going on, but then some years later you see it again, you're like, oh, I've seen that before. And it doesn't even matter that you don't know what it is. The fact that you've seen it before is a little bit helpful there. So yeah, a reporting system seems reasonable. It seems weird to me if things are as he makes them seem, that like you can't really report on these like weird spooky things you see without fear of losing your job. That sounds very strange. I'm actually a little skeptical that it's like that, but I would believe there's no reporting system, and there probably should be, just for no, like not extraordinary phenomena.
The fact that the reporting has been limited up to this time.
Could you tell me why you believe it's kind of to play the devil's advocate?
He's asking a speculative question here, asking him to speculate.
To the public?
There's certainly some national security concerns.
There you
when we
go,
use our
very
advanced
easy.
Sensors in our tactical jets to be able to identify these objects. However, there's no reason that the objects themselves would be classified. I would be curious to see how the security classification
Well, there
guideline
are
actually
reasons why they would be
spells out the
classified,
different,
but also
nuances of how this topic
the
is
reporting
classified
system
from-
could be
from
through the government
perspective
first,
of
and it
UAP.
like monitors for anything that should be kept confidential, and then the other stuff can be made public, right? Like, yeah, I get that you're annoyed that the government isn't like letting you talk about it, but like you can just the government could screen out the things that are classified. I understand that that's more worrying to a lot of people than having it be open, but there's also I also understand the need for like military secrets, even though I think our military industrial complex is definitely over bloated and like often unnecessary. Yeah, a number of other things. Yeah, I agree, Campbell. Like, there's so many other things it could be, and like there are so many things that like are important to to know. Like, you see weird stuff going on in the atmosphere. I mean, it could be just as simple as like, oh, I saw this weird thing, and it like turns out it's like a meteorite, and you know it could cause damage. Well, I guess by the time that gets reported, it's too late. But you know, like there could be so many things that are just reasonable to report on that have nothing to do with aliens.
Security.
I'll give you a follow-up on that. Assuming that there are reasons why not all this should be made public, this has been around
That's
for a
reasonable.
long period of time.
Also true.
Can
And
you
remember
think
where
of
this all
any-
started? Like,
think of
the whole
any
Area
reason
51, there's like
why
some guys
anything
found some
related to
sticks and
what
tinfoil in the
UAPs
desert.
say
That's what happened at
15
Roswell.
years
All right,
into
like,
action,
and
that
now
should
it's we have
be
this
made
whole
public.
full-blown thing, and everyone thinks like the government is hiding aliens or whatever.
I think one of it is acknowledging a vulnerability, both from a collection and I'll just say a countermeasure perspective. So it's
We'll go say-
not we haven't cracked for many years. Yeah.
Even say 20 years back. Is there any reason why when you go back that far things shouldn't be made public?
Unless it shows a specific
20
national
years
security
back?
vulnerability
Possibly,
as it
but
relates,
less
to a
likely, I don't know.
weakness in a particular defense system.
Oh, okay, Mr. Frey.
20 years sounds like a long time, but remember that a lot of our aircraft have been in use for much longer than 20 years. Maybe not much longer, but like there's some amount of like, well, we don't want, for example, Iran to know the specs of our drones or whatever. You know, like there's some amount of, and drones aren't new technology. They've been in use for at least 20 years. So like maybe, but the point he's trying to get to is like, well, okay, if it's past the point of military secrets, is there any reason why this should be confidential? But like,
Incident that you
but that what should be confidential?
that you
We're not
announced
talking about
occurred in
anything. No evidence has been
2004.
presented.
What kind of reporting took place after that incident?
None. We had a standard debrief. Where the
Okay,
next
given
day
that
went
we've
down
seen
to,
this much of this,
Kerry
okay, this is
Rittenhouse
kind of where I
and
thought
brief what
things were
happened,
going.
and
I want to
that
watch
was
some
it.
like,
No one else
you know,
talked to
we'll
us.
watch this for a little bit, but I want to find some
No one battered,
highlights
no one
because I
came.
think
That captain was
it's
aware,
one
admiral
thing
was
to
aware,
get kind of a
nothing.
sense of the general,
officers
like the
provided any
gist
sort
of
of
what's going on, which I
justification?
think we're doing a pretty good job of here.
No,
I want to see if
so-
there's anything of
no
note, and
squadron,
I
so-
like to go through,
Was
you know,
this
an additional
incident
hour and a
during the
half
UAP event that you encountered
of
while you
like
were a pilot?
potentially nothing.
Yes, it was.
We'll see.
Okay.
We'll watch this for a bit.
This is for any one of you. Based off of each of your experiences and observations, do you believe UAPs pose a potential threat to our national security?
Yes, and here's why.
Really?
The technology that
I guess
we face.
I guess I would
is
also say
far
yes.
superior
Now that I
to
think
anything
about
we
it,
have.
because my thought was like, wait, really? You're gonna be like, oh, this is a potential threat because aliens or whatever. But I guess even a more reasonable way of like, yeah, there's a potential threat in that they could be foreign military aircraft, and that is a potential threat. Don't get me wrong. I'm taking the position here of like from the position of American hegemony, not necessarily like morally. This guy's asking on as a representative of the United States. Maybe it's fine that American hegemony is challenged. That's not the point I'm trying to make. So much as to say like, okay, I guess yes, there could be substantial military threats to these, even from a very terrestrial source.
And you could put that anywhere. If you had one, you captured one, you reverse engineered it, you got it to work. You're talking something.
But now he's talking from the position of
go
like
into
it's
space,
definitely
Go
aliens.
someplace, drop down in a matter of seconds, do whatever it wants, and leave. And there's nothing.
But also, that's not really like a threat to national security in any way, unless
What
a
I'd also
foreign
like to add
military
from
is the one who
commercial
does this.
aviation and military aviation perspective, we deal with uncertainty in our operating space as a matter of our professional actions. Identifying friend from foe is very important to us. And so when we have...
And that's something he said that's like kind of noteworthy. Like, imagine you're in a situation where like you're a military pilot, and like you see a thing, you know, like maybe even it is a foreign military aircraft. Like, you can't be sure of what it's capable of, so you have to act as though like you have to figure that out. You can't just be like, well, I know this is possible in my aircraft, so only that should be possible. I think that's what he's talking about. Like, you have to entertain that uncertainty.
Identify targets, and we continue to ignore those due to a stigma or a fear of what it could be. That's an opening that our adversaries can take advantage of.
What steps should be taken to better understand and respond to UAP encounters in the interest of national security?
A reporting system does sound like a
There
good
needs to be
idea,
location where
to
this
be fair.
information is centralized for processing, and there needs to be a two-way communication loop so that operators on the front end have a feedback and can get best practices on how to process information, what to do, and to ensure that their reporting is being listened to. Right now,
And I want to double down. I'm like, even for purely terrestrial explanations, that makes a lot of sense to me. That there should be like even the way he described it there, it doesn't necessarily need to be public facing. This could all be, you know, just government agencies that look over this, because some of this is going to be important as like military secrets or whatever. But yeah, there should probably be some mechanism for reporting these things, and it's going to be probably mostly junk. But you know, maybe you see enough of the same kind of junk where you're just like, oh, okay, this is what's going on. And again, even from like a scientific perspective, it could literally just be like, oh, those are like some quirk of physics we hadn't noticed yet. You know, we can learn from this. And none of that has anything to do with aliens, right?
there is not a lot of back and forth.
Mr. Grush, in your complaint to the Intelligence Community Inspector General, you claim that you believe information is being hidden. What kind of information do you think was hidden, and do you think it should remain hidden?
Yes, I can speak to that very briefly in an unclassified manner. As you know, the preponderance of my complaint was classified to the intelligence communities. Both material acquisition and exploitation activity, also baselining the UAP.
I guess there's some amount of stuff he's not going to be able to talk about, so maybe that's going to be left out. But it does sound like he doesn't have actually any evidence.
That kind of information. Yeah.
Just like spooky
Thank
stories.
you very much. Now we'll go to Mr. Garcia.
Thank you. Again, thank you all for your service and for testifying today. Want to just talk about UAPs as it relates to what we're seeing in pilots' interaction with UAPs. Particularly, Mr. Graves, one of the, I think, concerns for members of this committee is...
Makes me wonder why people were like... Because I saw a lot of people online be like, oh my god, proof of aliens, why is nobody talking about this? And it's like, doesn't seem like that's anything close to what's happening here. But I guess those people are probably the kind that like see UFO sightings as evidence.
But you've also, I believe, discussed and know of many more pilots. This is just those that you're currently working with. Is that correct? Can you expand on that?
Certainly. I'll break that down in two ways. First, when we were first experiencing these objects off the eastern seaboard in the 2014 to 2015 time period, anyone that had upgraded their radar systems were seeing these objects. So there was a large number of my colleagues that were detecting these objects off the eastern seaboard. They were further correlating that information with their other onboard sensors, and many of them also had their own eye sightings as well of these objects.
I remember these are like, if they're aliens, they're just like, what, showing up on your radar and then dipping, like, and they've been doing this for decades for no discernible reason.
As well as the commercial aviation side. On the military aviation side, veterans that have recently got out have shared their stories and have expressed how the objects we were seeing in 2014, 2015 continued all the way to 2019, 2020, and beyond. And so it became a generational issue for naval aviators on the eastern seaboard. This was something we were briefing to new students. This is something that was included in the notice to airmen to ensure that there was no accidents. And now with commercial aviators, they are reaching out because they're having somewhat similar experiences as our military brothers and sisters, but they do not have any reporting system that they can send this to.
And let me just add, both to Mr. Fravor, as well as Mr. Graves, not having this system for reporting, would you both agree that it's harmful to not just our national security interests, but to understand this phenomenon of what's happening with UAPs?
Yeah, it seems very
I think
reasonable.
it's-
If that
it's,
like that would be my highlight from
it's
this. It's
actually-
just like
it's a
a
travesty that
reporting
we don't
system
have a
would be
system
helpful.
to
It
correlate
would be
this
good
and
in
actually
general.
investigate. You know, so if you took the East Coast, you know, there's coastal radars out there that monitor our air defense identification zone, so out to 200 miles. They can track these, you know, so when you see them, they could actually go and pull that data and get maneuvering. And instead of just having the airplanes, there's other data sources out there. And I've talked to other government officials on this. So you need a centrally located repository that these reports go to. So if you just stuck it in DOD, you wouldn't get anything out of the Intelligence Committee because they have a tendency to not to talk. But if you had a central location where these reports would come in, not just military, but also commercial aviation, because there's a lot of that going on, especially if you talk to anyone
And
that
part of
flies,
why
you
like
get a
I
whole-
find it wild that this reporting system wouldn't exist is how easy it would be to make. Just a very basic, very basic reporting system, like software engineers could make in an afternoon. And I mean, so like it wouldn't process anything. It would just be like, here's a website, you can enter in this information, and it's saved somewhere. That's really all they're asking. Like that's like the bare bones of what a reporting system would be like. And then of course you'd want like there's some other stuff you'd tack on top of that. Like you'd want someone to actually go over what's being reported. It sounds like they're kind of like some of these witnesses maybe want that to be publicly available, but some of them are less stern about that. I'm not really sure. But all of that's like not really hard at all. Um, so that's why it's like kind of wild to me. Like for real, like I could have this. I could have something like this done in like a day or two. If it's just saving information.
Hawaii, over the Pacific, they see odd lights. So I think you need to develop something that allows you a central point to collect the data in order to investigate.
Mr. Graves?
Now, of course, it might be more complicated the more
concur with everything
more
Mr.
you want to
Fravor
do
said.
with it, right? Like
I'll
if you
continue
wanted
to
to
say
start
that
calculating, like if you want to start like calculating events in different locations, like comparing them to one another, do analysis, which you can do. Like there's a lot of like data analysis that could be done based on that. That would be a little more complicated, but that also isn't necessary for a basic reporting system. That's why it's surprising to me that it doesn't exist. Like how hard would it be to just be like, oh hey, like type into a computer, this is where it was, this is what it did, this is when it happened, send.
Pilots that have reached out to me through Americans for Safe Aerospace are doing so because they don't feel there's another way for them to report this safety issue.
And I think one of the clear outcomes of this hearing already is that there has to be a safe and transparent reporting process for pilots, both on the commercial side and the military side, to be able to report UAPs in a way that's also transparent, but also understands the scope of our national security interests and what may be classified or not. But I think there has to be some sort of system, and so that's something that I hope can be an outcome that this committee can work on. Is there anything else for the two of you briefly beyond this reporting system that you think that we can do as a government to encourage and facilitate more civilian reporting?
I think we're doing it right now.
Okay,
I
great.
think this hearing is going to show the American people that their government takes this topic seriously.
And how
And I
about
guess, like,
civilians that may not be pilots?
maybe
What
this
kind of
reporting
process
system
could
you'd
be in
want
place for
like
civilians
people
who are not
only like
who
pilots
may
to
have
be able to
UAP
act
encounters? Do either
submit.
of you have any suggestions that could facilitate that?
Well, I mean, not just pilots,
My
but like anyone who
recommendations
would have
would be to
actual
make that
information.
a sensor-centric operation in order to make it as objective as possible.
Okay, sir, Mr. Fravor.
I agree with Mr. Graves on that.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not sure I understood the question. I think he was asking like if it should be public facing, which is why I'm interested in checking it out. YouTube, please. Oh no, please. You were doing so good. Why? Going back 15 seconds murders the video? Oh no. YouTube, please. Oh, let's try refreshing. Well, this is well and truly having an issue here.
Facilitate
Oh, got something.
government to encourage and facilitate more civilian reporting. on
think
the
we're doing it
civilian-
right now.
Okay,
I
great.
think this hearing is.
Oh,
is
okay,
going
okay,
to
okay.
show
He's
that
he's not
that
asking about whether it
the
should be
government
public
takes this
facing.
topic
This
seriously.
reporting system so much as like should civilian reporting be a thing?
What kind of process could be in place for civilians who are not pilots, who may have UAP encounters? Do either of you have any suggestions that could facilitate that?
My recommendations would be to make that a sensor-centric operation in order to make it as objective as possible.
Okay.
So if I'm understanding him correctly, when he says sensor centric, it means like prioritize information that comes from from like monitoring apparatus, and not just like, oh, I saw a thing, and it could have been like an eye booger, but I'm saying it's a UFO, as opposed to saying like, well, no, my radar picked this up or whatever. This is some sort of sensor, and I think that doesn't make a lot of sense. Again, really weird to me that this doesn't like this. Why are we doing like this? Is a congressional hearing over multiple days. There's another one happening right now, and this could be done in like literally 2 days by one person. I'm not even saying like if you have like a team of software engineers. If you want a team of software engineers, it'll be done like a few hours. This is really trivial to make, and it's wild. I guess maybe like if the government wants to have like a bunch of stuff tacked on top of it, then it wouldn't be trivial to make. But the basics of it, very, very easy. It's wild that it doesn't exist, and we're having multiple hour discussions about like, hey,
briefly,
should this
I also
happen?
just want to,
And also maybe aliens, even though
particularly
not
for Mr. Palace, another
aliens.
question for Mr. Grush. One of the things that I found fascinating in our discussion, Mr. Graves, last night as well, is that you both described UAPs and formations and the way they are observed in space or in our air, and the way that they move is essentially ways in which current technology or aircraft that we know of are unable to actually function or move. And so will you just, for the public record, again, once again, just...
Which, by the way, like the idea that they're moving in ways that we think are impossible right now might just mean that it's not an aircraft, right? But instead it's being taken as like, oh, it's alien spacecraft.
Mr. Fravor?
Yes, the objects that are being seen by commercial pilots are performing maneuvers that are unexplainable due to our current understanding of our technology and our capabilities as a country. And that applies for the military as well.
Mr. Fravor?
Yeah, I concur with that. We have nothing that can stop in midair and go the other direction, nor do we have anything that can, like in our situation, come down from space, hang out for 3 hours, and go back up.
Thank you. My last question,
as a note, they have not observed craft doing that. They have not observed craft going in and out of space. They have observed like weird, spooky behavior, I guess. And like, yes, they've observed something like stopping and then turning around, but maybe it wasn't an aircraft at all. Or maybe it's something that's classified or whatever.
Record as well, which is really important. Mr. Gresh, finally, do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over
So
40 witnesses over 4 years.
And where?
Okay, from testimony, yeah.
I know the exact locations, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General, and some of which to the intelligence committees. I actually had the people with the firsthand knowledge provide a protected disclosure to the Inspector General.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I would just say that I think that these questions,
without knowing what those things are, we can't really appraise it, right? And obviously, it's going to be classified, so that's why he's being really vague about it. That sounds like maybe there could be evidence, but it's not what's actually been presented.
And I look forward to
it's a reference to possible evidence existing at most.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Burchett himself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Garcia. I would like to have you on my legislation to do just that on the reporting, and we'll get together on that. Maybe you can be my co-sponsor on that. That'd be really cool.
You're making it. You need a software engineer? Hire me. I can do it in like 2 days. It really wouldn't take very long to make a very basic system.
How do you know that these were not our aircraft?
Some of the behaviors that we saw in a working area, we would see these objects being at 0.0 Mach, that's 0 airspeed, over certain pieces of the ground. So what that means, just like a river, if you throw a bobber in, it's going to float downstream. These objects were staying completely stationary in Category 4 hurricane winds. These same objects would then accelerate to supersonic speeds, 1.1, 1.2 Mach, and they would do so in very erratic and quick behaviors that I don't have an explanation for.
Okay.
So note that he said he doesn't have an explanation. This is definitively not right. This is definitively this thing or that thing. Now, I understand where he's coming from. Of like he has military experience and has an understanding of what should be feasible from an aircraft. But the question is, how do we know that these are not U.S. aircraft? Well, it is without question that these are not U.S. aircraft that he would be familiar with, right? Because he would know that it's possible for this behavior to happen. Now, is it U.S. aircraft that's possibly experimental, still being worked on? Maybe. More likely, it's not an aircraft at all, and you're just like what you're observing is not. It seems impossible for an aircraft because it's not an aircraft that's doing it, right? Maybe it's, I don't know, a particularly large piece of debris that's like happens to be like spun up and then going in weird directions or whatever. I don't know how possible that is. The point is, we're not like we can't be sure that it's necessarily an aircraft because he doesn't. He's not. If he was sure, if he could demonstrate that's what it was, we'd be hearing about it, or it'd be like the other guy who was talking about it. It's like, oh, it's confidential or whatever. But notice he doesn't really have a way of answering that question as asked, but he gave an answer, so it sounds like he's saying no, it's not a U.S. aircraft.
Have you spoken to
even though he can't really know
commercial
that.
and military pilots that have seen these off of our East Coast?
I have.
Okay.
He didn't see them.
Mr.
No,
Faber,
notably, he didn't see them.
I
He
noticed
talked to
that,
people who saw them.
In the Tic Tac video, it's Tic Tac like the candy, not TikTok like the Chinese communist.
Oh my God!
That's correct.
Yes, sir. I just want to make that because my daughter.
Note to the
corrected me on
audience:
that,
China
called
is
me
not a
boomer,
communist country.
And said, "Hey, boomer," and I said, "No, baby, it's Tic Tac like the candy. You're gonna have to just look it up." And but now I would also like to say today is a day of many firsts. It's a miracle that we're having this meeting, and it's also a miracle that my wife has put up with me for 9 years today. Today is my anniversary, so I want to tell my wife happy anniversary. And
Good for you. It's kind of weird to like shoehorn in here, but congratulations. That is very good for you. You know.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Mr. Faber, what astonished you the most about the flight capabilities of these Tic Tac? Very briefly.
The performance.
I guess
It was-
for his wife watching this would be like, hey, he didn't forget, like definitive, like, hey, I'm on congressional record as having not forgotten our
It's far
anniversary.
beyond actually our material science that we currently possess.
It's actually kind of funny that's
Are you aware of any
a
other
stereotype that men forget.
platforms
Like I'm
that
sure
track
there's
the recorded
basis
Tic
to it,
Tacs
but the reason why I
maneuvers
say it's
and
funny
all
is that for me and
system
Amazon
and
Kane,
everything?
I remember a lot of our
Rush.
like milestone
Thank you for being
dates,
here, brother.
and I
you
did
all
better than
very
she did for a
much.
while. Now she
Have you
remembers
faced
it.
any retaliation or reprisals for any of your testimony or anything on these lines?
Yeah, I have to be careful what I say in detail because there is an open whistleblower reprisal investigation on my behalf, and I don't want to compromise that investigation by providing anything that may
I have been like
help provide
pretty
some
impressed with how this guy
information,
has
but
been
it was very
dancing around
brutal
what he's allowed to
and,
talk about.
very
I don't want to say
unfortunate
dancing like it's
some of the
being
tactics
disingenuous so much
used
as like
to
he's been very
hurt me both
careful
professionally
and clear about what he's being
quite frankly.
careful about in
It's
order
very
to
unfortunate,
to
as
not
they say, when you're
to
over
not
target,
misspeak and
that's when
not
they do the
divulge
most
what he's not allowed to.
firing at you. Do you have
We
any
don't have to
personal
tell a room
knowledge
full of
who have
people.
been
No, I mean
injured
obviously,
in efforts to
obviously,
cover up
Chem
or
Gal, yeah, you
conceal
know, but
these extraterrestrial technology?
Yes.
I kind of understand where he's coming from, even though I do agree it's a little weird of
Have you
like
have anyone been
this is not the
injured
place for it, but I guess
that
it's
you-
kind of
that
cute to
you
be
know
like,
of
hey honey,
or
it's
heard of
it's our
over the years?
I
anniversary
have
and
to
I'm
be
like saying it
careful
in
asking that
Congress and whatever.
question.
Isn't that
I
neat?
directed people with that knowledge to the appropriate authorities.
Is
Maybe
simultaneously
in the,
cute and cringe. I guess is where I'm landing on it.
confidential area skiff.
Two
we could
things can
talk
be
about
true at
that,
once,
but
right?
Unfortunately, we were denied access to the skiff, and that's very unfortunate in this scenario. Mr. Faber, do you believe that you witnessed an additional object under the water in relation to your encounter?
I will say we did not see an object. There was something there to cause the whitewater, and when we turned around, it was gone. So there was something there that obviously moved.
Okay, it was not the
Okay,
same
so you didn't even
object, though, that
see a
you
thing.
you were looking at, correct?
No, we actually joked that the Tic Tac was communicating with something when we came back, and because the whitewater disappeared.
We were in
So you
another
didn't even see a
instance,
thing?
we're told
It's
about
not even a thing that he saw.
capabilities
Okay.
of a jamming during viewing of when there were some people chasing some of these objects. Did you experience any of that jamming or interrupting your radar or weapons system?
My crew that launched after we landed experienced significant jamming to the APG-73 radar, which was what we had on board, which is a mechanically scanned, very high-end system prior to the APG-79. And yes, it did pretty much everything you could do: range, velocity, aspect, and then it spit the lock, and the targeting pod is passive. That's what we were able to get the video on.
I'm about to run out of time, but are you aware of any of our enemies that have that capability?
No.
Okay, I would also like
No,
to
but
note
it's
for the
possible it's
record that,
U.S. aircraft, right?
like George
I remember
Knight,
something to note is that
breaking Area
these
51,
are,
he's the reason
because these are separate incidences, the same explanation doesn't have to apply to all of them. One of them, it might be weird, like, oh, like I was suggesting that maybe it wasn't an aircraft, it was like some piece of debris, or maybe it was like just a phenomenon of physics or whatever. Well, obviously that can't jam, well, maybe not can't, but like it's not really likely to jam these systems that he was just talking about. But these are different instances. It's not going. It does. Maybe one of these has one explanation, another has another explanation. It's kind of weird to be like, oh, they're all aliens. And by the way, all of these incidences have very, very different behavior. They just do weird, spooky stuff that we don't think is possible. So to be like, oh, these are aliens, and they're all doing different things for whatever reason, and they all behave differently, it's actually less explanatory than different phenomena have different explanations and different causes. That still is exceptionally unlikely that it would be aliens.
I knew about that, and the reason I know about the Tic Tacs is Leslie Keene from New York Times article, and I would encourage everybody to read that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back to you for no time.
Very good. Mr. Raskin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Graves, you reported UAP encounters during training flights, I think.
It's kind of interesting to be watching the journalists in the well there, like, for whatever reason, all like get up and turn around.
Encounters may be putting pilots at risk.
What's with the handkerchief?
My first question is, you've identified these as taking place on the East Coast. Is
Or
it
not
just on the
handkerchief.
East
What's
Coast
with the
where
bandana?
these encounters have been reported?
No. Since the events initially occurred, I've learned that the objects have been detected essentially where all operations, Navy operations, are being conducted across the world. And that's from the All-Domain Anomaly Resolutions Office reporting.
All right, can you describe your experience after you decided to come forward and go public with your experience?
Certainly. Like many others, in 2017, I saw the New York Times article come out as well. And for me, it was special because I recognized the voices on the video. I recognized the video itself. I had seen it when it was taken. I'd seen it when it was debriefed. And so that was kind of shook me because I realized that this problem was still ongoing. And so I reached out to colleagues back on the East Coast and realized that this was still a safety risk that they were dealing with, that they had essentially hit a wall with how they could move forward on this conversation. It was at that point when I decided to try to move the conversation forward myself.
Are there common characteristics to the UAPs that have been cited by different pilots, and can you describe what the convergence of descriptions is?
Certainly. We were primarily seeing dark gray or black cubes inside of a clear sphere.
I'm sorry, dark gray or black cubes?
Yes, inside of a clear sphere.
Okay, some consistency there does have relevance, I guess. Maybe he's getting some medical treatments, making his hair fall. Yeah, I actually had that thought as soon as I asked the question.
That occurred over
But it still seems like a weird solution. Whatever.
So I take it that you're arguing what we need is real transparency in a reporting system so we can get some clarity on what's going on out there, because there are many pilots in your situation, but we should have a way of developing a systematic inventory of all of such encounters. Is that right?
Yes, and I think we need both transparency and the reporting. We have the reporting, but we need to make sure that
information can be there is reporting? Okay, that makes a lot more sense. But he wants transparency. What the hell? Okay, so the reporting system exists. Then why are we talking about it like it doesn't exist?
It's been about 2 months or so, so I guess my experience has been overwhelming support from former colleagues of mine that have privately messaged me, and I do appreciate that.
Wait, then why are we here? If the reporting system, I guess he wants transparency, but transparency on what? That spooky things happen? We know spooky things happen. People have been on about this for literal decades.
Coming from where?
Certain senior leadership at previous agencies I was associated with. And that's all I'll say publicly, but I can provide more details in a closed environment.
Okay. Well, I hope you understand that.
One thing that's
there would
occurring to me
be
is that like
bipartisan
the Congress people
rejection
who
of
are
any
asking questions, right? They all have their
attempt,
time that they're allowed to ask
to
questions.
vilify,
As the previous
demonize, or
person, the
engage in
previous
other
one was saying like,
reprisals
"Oh,
against our
I yield
witnesses
back
and
the no
people
time I have left."
who are
But I have to
telling
assume
the
that they
truth
all
from their
like
perspective.
There were certain colleagues of mine
confer
that
about
were
what questions they're going to ask, so they don't ask the
brutally
same
attacked.
question
And it,
three
actually makes me
times. So it's
very
kind of funny
upset
that like for the
as a
purpose of
leader
like
to see that
procedure,
happen to other
everyone has their
coworkers and
5
actually
minutes or whatever.
superiors
But
of mine over the
but
last 3 years.
if
How do
we've
you
agreed
account
on
for
what
that
questions are going to be asked,
response?
just ask
That
them all.
seems
It's
like
fine.
a bizarre response.
I call it administrative terrorism. That's their quiver, their tool in the toolbox to silence people, especially.
What is he talking
the,
about?
career government
I
service.
missed something and.
Well, it's only been about 2 months or so I guess my experience has been overwhelming support from former colleagues of mine that have privately messaged me. And
Oh, he's only
I do
been at this for
appreciate
2
that.
months.
But I do have knowledge of active planned reprisal activity against myself and other colleagues, and it's very very upsetting to me.
Coming from where?
Certain senior leadership at previous agencies I was associated with.
So by the way, like reprisal
That's
isn't
all
necessarily
but I can provide more details
unwarranted.
in
People, this is another thing that happens a lot with conspiracies, where people are like, "Oh, they're like trying to silence me for whatever." But like, I guess the context, the example I would give you is like, imagine a university professor who was teaching that the Earth was flat, and then was fired for it. They could very easily be like, they're trying to silence me or whatever. But like more accurately, you're causing harm by spreading lies, right? Or like or in this case, it wouldn't be by spreading lies necessarily, but maybe like speculating in ways that are misleading or possibly dangerous. Is that like reprisal or silencing? I guess you could say it is, but the question is whether it's reasonable to do so. I would argue that for the professor teaching flat Earth, yeah, it's pretty reasonable because it's unsubstantiated and you're teaching, you're spreading falsehoods. You're teaching things that are not true. And it would make sense. Is that silencing? I guess the question's open for interpretation. In a similar way, people would complain about like Facebook bans as being censorship. Like, no, like not really. And also, like, there's a lot to get into with that. The point is that repercussions don't necessarily mean that you're right. I understand that it feels that way, which is why I've argued with people before that the Confederate flag should not be banned, just because like it makes them feel persecuted, and therefore like they think they're right. Like it compounds their beliefs. But I've also I'd have to think about that subject again because I'm less confident that that the people who have such strong views on it would necessarily be swayed. Like it would, I don't know how that it would necessarily make it that much worse. I still don't think there's a reason to ban it. I guess I'm getting lost in the sauce here. The point I'm trying to make is that reprisal or repercussions for certain discussions isn't necessarily like, oh, they're trying to hide the truth. It might be, well, what you're doing is harmful and there should be repercussions.
Okay. Well, I hope you understand that there would be bipartisan rejection of any attempt to vilify, demonize, or engage in other reprisals against our witnesses and people who are telling the truth from their perspective.
Yeah, there were certain colleagues of mine that were brutally administratively attacked, and it actually makes me very upset as a leader to see that happen to other coworkers and actually superiors of mine over the last 3 years.
How do you account for that response? That seems like a bizarre response.
I call it administrative terrorism. That's their
Okay,
their quiver,
but that doesn't.
their tool in the toolbox.
But that doesn't
to
answer
silence
why.
people, especially, the career government service cares about their career, cares about their clearance, their reputation to climb the ladder, and when you threaten that career path, a lot of people back off.
In what way are you
But
threatening
I'm here
that?
to represent those people.
Yeah, I don't know. This feels weirdly conspiratorial.
Mr. Fravor, what about you? What has your experience been since you've come forward with your perspective on
Like,
this?
given that this guy was also talking about what would be classified information, like, you could also imagine reprisal being like, hey, you want to go public with this thing that is classified, don't do that, and he'd call it administrative terrorism when they're, like, threatened with lawsuits or court martials or whatever. Like, yeah, if you're threatening to release confidential information because relates to current military secrets, that would make sense too. And it's weird the way he's talking about it.
Actually, I've been treated very well. and the 6 people that were involved, myself included, all of them have or will be retiring from the military as 05s or 06s. And all my friends that are very senior, 3 and 4 stars, I've talked to them. They believe, they understand there's a problem, but no, I was actually treated really well.
And what is your general interpretation of these phenomena, or what is your current thinking of trying to make sense of them?
Well, I'll say, you know, I'm not like a UFO fanatic. It's not me.
Sounds like you
but
are.
I will tell you that what we saw with 4 sets of eyes over a 5-minute period, still, there's nothing. We have nothing close to it. It was amazing.
Yeah,
to
and there
see.
should
I
be
told my
investigation
buddy
into
I
that kind
wanted
of
to
thing,
fly it.
because
It's
who knows
just
what
incredible technology.
what the event was, and
All
like
right,
maybe
Mr.
we can
Chairman,
learn
thank you
something
very much. I'll
new,
yield back to you.
just like scientifically.
Thanks. On to Ms. Luna.
Mr. Grush, in speaking to you yesterday, I just wanted to follow up on Representative Raskin's questions. In the last couple of years, have you had incidences that have caused you to be in fear for your life for addressing these issues?
Fear for your
Yes,
life.
personally.
Jesus, what the hell?
I just want everyone to note that he's coming forward in fear of his life to put in perspective if they
What
were
the
really
hell
not
kind of
scared about this
threats
information
to your
coming out. Why would
life?
someone be intimidated like that?
Okay, so there's a lot going on there. Like, implication of evidence that isn't being presented through the mechanisms of, like, why would he be coming forward at risk to his life if there wasn't something there? Well, lots of things could be the case, but we haven't heard them. Additionally, like, why the hell would he be threatened? Like, why would he feel threatened to his life? And also, feeling that your life is under threat is not the same thing as your life actually being under threat. He had heard reprisals or whatever. Maybe he, like, oh, you feel like threats to your life? Well, yeah, because I could lose my job, and then how would I feed my family? That doesn't mean that's actually going to happen, nor does it lend additional credibility to his testimony. But the implication to this question, oh my god, I can't stand it.
To your knowledge, are
Oh.
NHIs working with adversarial foreign governments in either technology exchange programs or back engineering programs?
I don't have data on that. I'm not sure.
Have you heard or you had people come forward to present that evidence?
Not that particular evidence that you just espoused.
Okay, on the 19th of April, Dr. Kirkpatrick, head of Aero, had said that he did not find any evidence of UAPs. You also stated that you had, in your interview, that you had briefed him on information that you were uncovering, but that he did not follow up with you. Were the items that you divulged to him pertinent to national security?
Yes, him and I had a classified conversation in April 2022 before he took over Aero in July 2022, and I provided him some concerns I had.
Do you know why he might not have followed up with you?
Unfortunately, I cannot read his mind. I wish he did.
There's a
I was-
lot
I
of
was
questions
happy to
about
give sage counsel
asking
to him
the
on,
witnesses
where
to
look when he
speculate,
took
which
the
is kind of weird to me.
Aero.
Okay, and then my last question for you before I move to Mr. Graves is you received prior approval from the Defense Department to speak on certain issues, correct?
Correct, through DOPSR, DoD Pre-Publication and Security Review, and I just want to remind the public, they're just looking from a security perspective. These are my own personal views and opinions, not the department's.
Okay, I'm asking that though mainly because I think that there are many people that would like to discredit you, so it does bring a certain amount of credibility to your testimony.
I'm required by law to do that as a former intelligence officer, or I go to jail for revealing classified information.
Yeah, we don't want you to go to jail. My next question would actually be for Mr. Graves. Can you please explain to me in detail the event that occurred at Vandenberg Air Force Base?
Certainly. In the 2003 timeframe, a large group of Boeing contractors were operating near one of the launch facilities at Vandenberg Air Force Base when they observed a very large 100-yard sided red square approach the base from the ocean and hover at low altitude over one of the launch facilities. This object remained for about 45 seconds or so before darting off over the mountains. There was a similar event within 24 hours later in the evening. This was a morning event, I believe 8:45 in the morning. Later in the evening, post-sunset, There were reports of other sightings on base, including some aggressive behaviors. These objects were approaching some of the security guards at rapid speeds before darting off.
That is spooky.
This is information that
I
was
still
received
think
through one
aliens
of
is
the,
a less
witnesses
likely
that had
explanation than a
approached me
bunch of
at
other
Americans for
things.
Safe Aerospace.
Was this documented in any official form, whether it was a police blotter?
Yes, they had official documentation and records from the event that the witness held over the years.
And I'm not going to ask you to do it right now for time reasons, but you would be able to sketch what was witnessed, correct? And have you seen that before on any other equipment and/or during your flight time?
I have not seen what they've described. This object was estimated to be almost the size of a football field, and I have not seen anything personally that large.
Okay, and then another question on follow-up referencing the gimbal video go fast incident. Can you just clarify, because to our understanding the footage was actually cut off at a certain point, but what happens at the end of that video, just for those Americans specifically there that are wanting to know about the rest of that footage?
Certainly. There was some uncertainty or instability with the object. It seemed to rock a bit, and that's the last I had seen of the video. Much of the data that I would recommend be analyzed would consist of radar data that would provide precise kinematics on the object, as well as the fleet of objects that were operating nearby.
Okay, and follow-up, in regards to the reporting procedures that Mr. Garcia had addressed on, as well as Representative
Yeah, I guess what I'd see here is, like,
FAA, to your understanding,
just to
pilots
compound
that
what I
are
was saying earlier,
receiving
like, we should
commercial airline
probably
pilots,
investigate these
are they
events just so we
receiving,
understand
cease
them
and
better.
desist letters from corporations
But I don't
for
think
coming forward
aliens are
with
necessarily an
information in
explanation. It
regards
seems
to
pretty
safety
unlikely.
for
No one's
potential
actually said it,
airline passengers?
but it's
I
like,
have been
kind of
privy
implied
to,
in the nature of the
conversations with
discussion.
commercial,
That
aviators
said,
who have
we have
received-
about an hour left in this hearing, and I think we've gotten the general sense. So I want to take some time to look over some of the highlight videos to see if there's anything particularly relevant, just in case it'll be later and we won't see it. So
Big day yesterday.
oh
Had to
god,
hold it all
breaking
up.
points. Hold on, never mind. Breaking points is not particularly reliable. Let's see. Is there? I looked earlier to see if there were highlight videos, and I thought I had seen more than this. Okay, what's in this
We
one?
begin with that historic UFO hearing on Capitol Hill today. As we just said, the bipartisan push for transparency, certainly decades in the making. The nation watched gripping identified objects from that hearing.
Witnesses here. They took an oath. They took an oath to uphold the.
All right.
And I'm here to voice the concerns of more than. We convene here.
We saw a
I
lot
stand
of
on
this.
accurate identification. The UAP is real and reproducible in the 2020. After upgrades were made, at first we assumed they were infrared systems. Whiskey 72,
Okay, is this
10
just?
miles off the coast
Is
of
this all
Virginia
from
Beach.
the earlier part?
The
Because
mission
we hadn't seen this.
continues
Is
to appear
this? Are
above
they just
them.
going to play
Access to
their
those additional
opening
read-ons when
statements?
I requested it. I made the decision.
Yeah, it sounds like they're just their openings.
F-18F, so we had pilots aligned it with my.
Okay, this is also pretty telling. All the highlights are from the opening statements, which makes it seem like there aren't really highlights. There isn't really much more that we're going to get out of this. I was hoping to get something out of these highlight videos, but it seems like there's just not much going on. What is the Associated Press? It's a short from the Associated Press.
Do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
Okay,
and
but he
where?
believes. Okay, that's not actually.
I know the exact
anything.
locations, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General.
Has any of the activity?
Yeah, I guess that is kind of information. So, I kind of want to wrap up with this here because it's been kind of what I expected, and we went on about it for quite a while. I guess what I'd say is, it sounds like that one guy, the
to encourage.
What's his name? It's the I think he was the guy on the sitting on the left, the guy who kept going on. Oh yeah, Mr. Grush. This guy who kept trying to avoid saying anything, divulging any classified information, as he should, to be clear. He seems to maybe have some information. It's hard to say because obviously we're not being presented with it, and we can't be presented with it given that it's classified. So maybe there's something to that. Now there's a little bit of, I guess there's a little bit of conflation that can happen, not by what's being said, but what's happening in the brain. Because I'm noticing I'm doing it, which is that you go, okay, these other two guys are talking about consistently talking about these square vessels that are really big with a sphere around them, and they do this weird stuff. And then this guy, Mr. Grush, says, "Oh, I know the location of certain unidentified aircraft like that we have in military possession." And what you could do, hearing those next to each other, is you can start to think, "Oh, well then, I guess we know that those things exist. Those vehicles that he's talking about are these huge square vessels surrounded by spheres or whatever." But he didn't talk about that. What he said, and he wouldn't be allowed to divulge what those craft are like, I imagine. There's no certainty that what he's talking about is anything related or anything like what the other two are talking about. It's very possible that he's talking about like, oh, it's just like an aircraft that we didn't make and we don't really understand. Like maybe it's from somewhere else or whatever, or maybe there aren't good markings on it, or maybe it's experimental or whatever else. Now he seems to think that there's more to it than that, but it's hard to say what's going on without access to the evidence that he's not allowed to talk about. Ultimately, it sounds like the totality of this is like, there's some spooky stuff, and some people think aliens. There's no good reason for them to think aliens, but they do think it. And they're now, in addition to thinking it, saying it in Congress. But that's not really anything, right? I'm glad we went over it, but I guess the long and short of it is that this isn't really anything. And it's kind of telling what the highlights are supposed to be. It's kind of telling what these witnesses are actually talking about, because they're not talking about evidence. They're talking about, we saw spooky things and there should be a reporting system. Okay, I agree. There should be a reporting system. And then one of the guys is like, "Oh, there is a reporting system, but it should be transparent." I was like, well, what do we mean by that? Do you mean like it should be open to the public? Maybe, maybe not, because as y'all admitted, there could be national security risks and there could be military secrets in just observing these things. Because experimental aircraft are almost certainly being tested constantly. Whether any of them are the cause behind these weird, spooky UAP events is impossible for me to say. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. The point is that if any of them are, well, then that's the kind of thing that's a military secret, and obviously the government wouldn't want to be public facing. You can argue as to whether it should be or not. I'm not really here for that. It just sounds like it's much ado about nothing, and people were people were going nuts online talking about like, oh, this is aliens and we have proof now, and look, it's in Congress. But like, really look at what we heard. Is it that? I don't think that's what we heard. And it seems like it's not really anything here. It's just more like, UFOs have, like, yeah, there's some spooky stuff, and we don't really know what the explanations are for it. And I agree that people should be looking into it. I would like scientists to look into it in particular, because some amount of it could yield information that, like, maybe they just didn't realize a quirk of our technology, and that would be cool to learn about. Or maybe there's some physics thing, as I keep mentioning. So, like, yeah, people should probably be looking into it, but aliens seems exceptionally unlikely. Because remember, as I mentioned before, we have to imagine not only that there are aliens, but they're also intelligent, and they're also able to create spacecraft, which we can't, right? It's not just that they're intelligent, that they're more intelligent than us, and by a lot. And we're able to travel here, which there's a large amount of the universe where it would be impossible to have traveled to Earth in the time that the universe has existed. And they just showed up in ways where we don't have any clear evidence. They didn't, like, I'm thinking of Independence Day. Like, it's not some giant spacecraft floating over Los Angeles. Where you're like, yeah, that's there. We can see that. It's not that. It's instead they're showing up in these weird ways where they act in confusing manners and then peace out without ever interacting with us, but they keep being here for decades, but only like starting in the 1960s. That didn't really happen before for some reason. I guess that's not entirely true. I think claims of UFO sightings might have existed. It might have happened before the 60s, but you'll get the point, right? Like, it was just so exceptionally unlikely that almost anything was a better explanation for these weird incidences. But they should probably be investigated, sure. I don't know why we need a congressional hearing to be like, hey, it should be a reporting system. It should be like, okay, moving on now. And people are talking about, like, we discovered aliens or some shit. Oh, frustrating. Well, in any case, that's that. And I think we'll cut it here. I didn't ever finish my tea. I definitely added too much lemon, but it was nice. It did cut through a little bit of the. It was a nice compliment. If I added a little less, it's like a nice. It's a nice little touch, a nice little taste to add. So you got me on that one, Orwell. Definitely still wrong about the sugar thing. So we'll do that again in the future, but less lemon. And I still have that list in case anyone's curious. I don't think I actually showed it on stream, but I have like this list here of like, all right, ideas to like improve my tea experience. So I have getting an earthen teapot. I don't have one. My teapot is glass actually. To warm the teapot before pouring, though when I make tea most of the time, I don't make it in a teapot. I just make a single cup. Well, this mug has a strainer, but I also mentioned I have those little strainer balls that I use for most of my mugs. But the next time I make like a teapot, maybe I can try warming the teapot before pouring. We have trying brown sugar. We're gonna try that at some point. That sounds interesting. And of course, and though with the brown sugar thing, I think that's got to be certain types of teas that'll be better with than others. I imagine that would be better with something like chamomile than it would be with like green tea. You're becoming a tea making artist. Well, I'm trying. I am trying. I dipped my toe in starting with the COVID pandemic. I was like, oh, I got a lot of time inside. I like tea. Why don't we try upping my tea game? So I'm trying. I'm trying to learn about it. Some of my friends ask me like I'm an expert, and I'm like, I am still very much learning. So far I've learned I prefer loose leaf tea, and I've found some places that have very good blends, but I'm not an expert. I'm still very much at the beginning, and that's why we're learning from long dead writers and some less recently dead in Hitchens, and some still alive. But we're still learning and trying to figure stuff out. I have tried the milk thing in the past, so that's wrong. And I am very much looking forward to trying with salt or pepper. So following, if you haven't already, would go towards that end of punishing me for existing or for trying to make tea in different ways. God, that's gonna suck. That is definitely gonna suck. But I'm looking forward to it. So if you want to tell your friends about my stream, if they just want to see me suffer through some bad tea, that isn't that enough. But yeah, it's some interesting news we went over today, I guess. Oh, one thing I didn't mention that I wanted to very quickly was the incident with Mitch McConnell in a press conference. I don't know if you've heard about this. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Actually, Mitch McConnell. He was in the middle of a press conference, and he just kind of froze up.
Meanwhile,
yeah, you saw that?
In Washington, there are new concerns tonight.
Okay, I don't. All right, so here's the news conference. In case you hadn't seen it, we'll wrap with this.
Just a few moments into his weekly news
conference. No, don't give me the commentary. I just want to see the video. I know I saw it before. I think this is it. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Dang it! I had this pulled up, and it sucks that I don't have it right now. Okay, here we go. This should be it.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. We're on a path to finishing the NDA this week. It's been good bipartisan cooperation and a string of...
and he just stops. First, it's like, oh, is that just a pause? Is he just finding his next word? But then it becomes kind of uncomfortable. It seems like there's something wrong. Now, obviously, I don't know what happened here. If there's any medical stuff like they haven't produced or whatever. There's been a lot of discussion on the subject, and he just like doesn't really say anything and then just walks off. Now, obviously, if there's something going on, it's good that they took him to see like a medical professional, which is I assume what happened here. But the point is, there's been a lot of discussion about it, and some people have been like making fun of it and some people have not. I don't take issue with the people making fun of it. I have been that. People are like, oh, it's so messed up because he's old. Like making fun of a medical concern. It's like, well, the point is, this guy has done demonstrable harm to the country, and if that has a chance of ending soon, maybe that's a reason for optimism, I suppose. However, more importantly, is just like, at least to my mind, is kind of something to note with situations like this. This is far more likely with people who are older. Now, I'm not saying there should be. I'm just saying this is a concern when we have the majority of government, or maybe not a majority, but so much of government held by people who are ancient. This is going to happen more often, and it's worrying because if this happens with people who are in the middle of handling an important crisis, well, that's kind of scary. We can't just put everything on hold. The world doesn't stop because one person is having a medical issue. And so while I do not think in any way that we should mandate retirement ages or anything like that, I'm not advocating for ageism here. The point is that this is an issue, and I don't really know a solution to it. One of those might be like term limits, like de facto causing this, because one of the issues is that Mitch McConnell, like, if you're in Mitch McConnell's district, are you going to try to run to get it to unseat him? He's been in office since like the dinosaurs or whatever. It's just so unlikely that you'll defeat him. It's better not to try and instead just wait for him to leave office through retiring on his own or dying or whatever else. And so term limits can go some way towards that. But this is also, I would instead prefer to point this in the direction of optimism as encouragement. If you're younger, if you're, I guess, my age, I guess a little older than my age, there are places for you in government, and it would be very good for government to have young people in it, not just because they have their own interests in mind, but like think about like if Mitch McConnell is like, how many years does Mitch McConnell have left? Less than 20? I think that's reasonable. What interest does he have in like making sure the world goes forward better? That's only with like a really selfish view of the world, but he's also a Republican, so like obviously he's looking at the world very selfishly. There's a lot of like fuck you got mine in Republican politics. And when he's 20, like less than 20 years left on this planet, he doesn't give a shit. Like this is why like people point out like why is someone this ancient? Why does he have such control over things like responses to climate change? By the time it happens, he's dead. He doesn't care. I don't know. I feel like my thoughts on this are still in development and they're kind of all over the place, but it does indicate to me the importance of, at the very least, a diversity of age ranges in positions of power. And that's why it's like kind of cool that AOC is in government, but she's also kind of the exception. And it's also kind of an issue when it comes to things like the presidential campaign, because while there are some uppercomers on the right, the Democrats don't really have that. People were like, well, if I don't really like Biden, who do I go for? I mean, RFK Jr. is more aligned with Republicans than he is with Democrats, which is kind of saying something. If you don't believe me, look at the people who are looking to vote for him. The people who, a lot of there's been polling done where if someone is likely to vote for RFK, they say, well, their next choice would be Trump or DeSantis, which is pretty telling. He's also not particularly young. And then like the person people have gone to in the past is like Bernie Sanders, who's also a dinosaur. We need more inspiring politicians from younger age groups. And I don't mean that you have to be literally 33 or whatever. I guess you can't run if you're 33. I don't mean you have to be like 36 to run in running for president or whatever. But I mean even someone like 50 would be nice. And that was kind of cool about both Obama and Clinton when they were running. It was like they weren't ancient at the very like. I think Clinton was still like in his 60s or something. I actually don't know how old Clinton is, but like Obama was decently young. That was cool. Even Bush Jr. was decently young for a president. But we have all these ancient dinosaurs in office, and I don't know. It worries me, that this kind of thing could happen to someone with this much power. Not that they would be exempt from it so much as that we put power in people who could just have a medical issue. Like most of the Supreme Court is ancient. I guess less so now because they keep dying because they were so old. I don't know. I don't really have much in the way of like therefore we should blank here or like how we should or like what we ought to take away from it. It's just worrying to me that people in positions like this are this old and like this kind of thing can start happening again. I'm not advocating that there should be like a mandated retirement age for elected office. Just like at a minimum, I would encourage diversity of age demographic. I don't know. That's all I really have to say about that. But I didn't want to go without mentioning it on stream today. I'm gonna cut it here. I mean, we got some. I wish we had ended with the tea discussion, but I'd forgotten about the Mitch McConnell thing until that moment. So I'm glad I remembered. We'll be back tomorrow. Figure out what we'll do there. But Wednesday we're gonna start doing our. Remember, we're doing weekly Magic the Gathering content. So if you're here for that, we're gonna start on Wednesday. We might do more during the week, but every Wednesday we're gonna do it for sure. So that all being said, thanks so much for watching, everybody. Don't forget to tell your friends so that bad things can happen to my tea and to me in turn. And I'll catch you next time. Have a good one. Bye then. Bye.